As the month of March draws to a close, so too does my most favorite time of the year. Not Christmas, not Lent, but rather March Madness. It's Final Four time in both the men's and women's tournament, and we're here to break down everything you need to know for all the big games here on Shamrock Sports.
So March Madness for the Irish went about as good as could reasonably be expected. Both teams made the tournament, which is always a good thing. We got to watch our teams play in March. We could always be thankful for that. But for the women, they made it a bit farther than the men's. They made it all the way to the Sweet 16 with a gut-wrenching loss to North Carolina State. John, your thoughts on the game, the season, and what to look forward to next year?
Well, I am very, very impressed with this Irish squad this year. It's coaching Niele Ivey, second season. The first year was a little disappointing, but that was fine. That's a transition year. She's got her players in place. She's got her system in place, and things went about, like you said, as well as you could have expected. We were projected to finish 6th in the ACC. We finished 3rd, much better than we were expected. And we went to the Sweet 16 and lost to a very, very good NC State team and played a very competitive game, too. If it weren't for a couple of turnovers at the end and just, a staunch defensive stand by a veteran Wolfpack squad, I really think you could have saw Notre Dame be playing UConn in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it all. This is a team that, in the end, their biggest failing was something that they grew out of. It was an immaturity issue for this Irish team. At the end of the game, Olivia Miles, you're going to see here, freshman point guard. This is the youth of this team. She is a player in her first year, her first year and a half. She enlisted early. But these are moves you see from a veteran. She's pulling out NBA layups, WNBA layups. She's pulling up from behind the arc. This is the confidence of a player that doesn't play like a first year, and you're going to get her for a lot more of these reps. If you're an Irish fan, it's hard not to be excited about the core of this team being young. Miles, Sonia Citron, Maddie Westbell. This is an underclassmen core that isn't just good, but they're good, and they're here to stay, and they're going to keep on getting better. Miles in particular, you're going to see Sonia Citron there as well. These are players that are going to be here for the next 2 years, the next 3 years. And I think this Irish team has a lot to grow from. The North Carolina State game is obviously disappointing, but you look at how they lost that game. They were up by 1 late left. They couldn't get the ball in bounds on an inbound play. That's just the immaturity. That's just the youth of the team. That's only going to grow. They're only going to get better in the future. Those youthful mistakes, those small mistakes, those aren't going to happen. They'll grow out of that. Ivy will have a whole other offseason to coach this team up, bring in new recruits. I think how this team comes out next season will be an improved Irish team, a team that has a lot more experience, a team that has just as much talent as before, but knows how to use that talent a little bit better. Though I will think looking at next year, what's going to be interesting is how they make up the depth. Anaya Peoples, Sam Brunel, Abby Prohaska, all entering the transfer portal. It's hard to knock them for it. Obviously it's the right career move for them. It makes a lot of sense. If you're Sam Brunel, for example, you led the team in scoring your freshman year, but the last 2 years have found yourself as a 6-man role coming off the bench. These are all players, her and Naya Peoples, they can start for these these top level teams. They can go to a high major and get minutes. So I think it's hard to not see from their perspective why they win transfer. But I think what's going to be really interesting is how Notre Dame builds up that depth, because they're losing number 6, 7, and 8 off the bench for this team. They're going to need to get those minutes back, get that talent back. Because Anaya Peoples especially, in the North Carolina State game, I thought she played a very underrated role. She obviously wasn't the main factor on offense, but on defense, they brought her in almost every big game they played this year. Miami also comes to mind, and she would shut down opponents defensively. She has a very underrated presence on the board for someone who's not necessarily a big man. She also can get a steal. She'll get a few layups for you too. I think she's a player that if you're Notre Dame, it's hard to replace her because you can't just bring in a glue guy. They're called glue guys for a reason. They're far and few between. They play such a big role. So I think whether Notre Dame goes to the portal or they get a freshman to do it or they get someone to step up, I don't know what the role is, but it's going to be a big chunk of minutes and a big role they're going to need to fill.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. You talked about Peoples. She came in and played heavy minutes when Maya Dodson got into foul trouble early and had to shut down Elissa Cunane. She still had a great game. She paced both teams with 16 points and had 10 rebounds. But I feel like that's such a big blow, especially because you look at the big star we're bringing in next year, KK Brunsfeld. She's a little smaller guard, 5'10". She's going to score. She's going to help run the offense, and I think adds great depth when Citron and Miles can't play, when they're on the bench. But I think we're going to need, another forward, another wing player to step up then. Hopefully Maya Dodson is able to come back. She filed for a waiver with the NCAA to come back for, play a 6th year of basketball, which would be great. And she's just such a great anchor for this defense, averaging over 2 blocks a game this year and really just being such an intimidator in the paint. Teams have to game plan around her. They know that, if you're driving to the paint, you see Dodson down there, you're going to reconsider trying to, go up and over her. And I think that was such a big part of why we did lose the game. We talk about the inexperience. Yes, that's true. We had 7 turnovers in the last quarter of the game. We had 5 turnovers from sophomore Maddie Westbeld, 4 from Olivia Miles. But I think ultimately the fact that NC State was able to kind of assert their authority in the paint more so than they would have without Dodson being there, I think was ultimately what led to Notre Dame's downfall in that game.
Well, John, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't know if you saw the WNBA draft list was announced. That Maya Dotson's name is indeed on that list, which is not a positive sign for any hopes about getting her back for a 6th year. Though, I think if you're a Notre Dame fan, it's hard to watch her play this year and not think she has a good shot of being in the WNBA. Yeah. Though I do think Maddie Westbeld is an interesting piece to keep an eye on, because against North Carolina State, when Dodson got into foul trouble, those 2 fouls in the first, entire second quarter, a quarter in which the Irish did very well in, and Kinane was contained for the most part. It was Westbeld that guarded Kinane, not Dodson. I don't think anyone could have seen Westbeld being, kind of a center for this team. She's, only 6'2", I believe. She's traditionally profiles more of number 4, but she was tasked with guarding Kinane and did a very good job, both on defensive end as well as asserting herself in the paint a little bit. Obviously Kinane would get the better of her in the second half, and get the better of Dodson as well, because she's obviously a fantastic player. But I think it's very promising to see a player like Westbeld step up into that role. She said in the press conference after the game, she wasn't anticipating playing the 5. She wasn't anticipating guarding Kinane. That was just something she took upon herself. When Dodson came out, Coach Ivey told Westbeld, you got to get in there, you got to get on Kinane, and she did a good job with it. So I think she's going to be a player. Next year, if Dodson's not on that team, they're going to need her to be in that. Whether they play her as a true 5 or they do a bit more with the men.
Small ball.
Yeah, a bit more like what the men's team this year did, where they kind of had 2 more stretch 4s on the court. Atkinson and Leshevsky. If they do more of that with Westbeld, that might be the solution. But I do think she's going to have a big role to play. Or maybe Natasha Marshall, who was out this season and last season due to injury. People forget she was the number 35 rated recruit in the country coming into the program, and she's 6'5". If they could use her in that 4-5 role, that's going to be a big boost for this Irish team, a big step forward to replacing Dodson.
Yeah, I agree that Westbeld's defense has just loads of untapped potential. She played very well against NC State and really was able to assert herself on that end, especially when her shots weren't getting them up in the second half. I think NC State really keyed in on her, specifically on offense. So if you can rely on her to both be a contributor on offense and defense, play both ends of the floor, that's going to be huge going forward, because so far, as big as she is, she projects more as an offensive prototypical stretch 4. She can step out to the 3-point line, launch it from deep, but is primarily a scorer. If she can convert into a 2-way player, watch out.
Absolutely, and looking at the more general scheme of things, obviously the North Carolina State loss. North Carolina State would go on to lose to UConn in the Bridgeport Regional. That does mean we have our 4 teams to the women's Final Four. What are your thoughts?
So, in my original bracket that I filled out, I want to say 99% accuracy. We're doing pretty well right now. It's not that hard if you just pick the higher seed most of the time. I think that it's going to be very, very close games, both of them. I think the South Carolina-Louisville game projects more to, have a chance of a blowout. South Carolina beats their teams by an average of 20 points per game and has only lost twice all season long. There's a reason they're the number 1 team in the country right now. They blew out Creighton by 30. A team that made it all the way to the Elite Eight. Granted, they are a 10 seed, and you could say, when Cinderella's time was up, midnight hit, the clock hit midnight,
Pumpkin.
But yeah, right? But ultimately, I don't think it was any sort of mistake. We talked about Aliyah Boston, right? She is, arguably the best player in the country, up there with Paige Beckers, in my opinion, of who's, the true number 1 right now. But she won both the Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. So, like we said, she can get it done on both ends, and they have a dynamic backcourt too. They have Destiny Henderson and Zaya Cook. They both score in double figures. So, if you're able to focus just on Boston, you got 2 other guards to worry about too. They do it both, in the paint. They can hit it from 3. They can score from pretty much anywhere, all while just contributing great defense. So, in my opinion, if Louisville's going to be able to contend against this, you have to look at Emily Engstler to try to slow down Boston in the paint, and then Haley Van Lith is just going to have to cook. She's Kobe's protege. She helped to train Gianna, and they were working on basketball together. And she plays a lot like Kobe, in my opinion, because she can go 7 for 21, or she can just light it up and take over a game. She's going to need to take over a game if they're going to beat the Gamecocks.
Absolutely, and you said, in the start of the segment, you pick the high seed, you're usually going to do pretty well.
Yeah.
When I filled up my bracket, no need to worry about it. I took South Carolina all the way because this is the best team in the country, and they're the best team in the country for a reason. Aliyah Boston, what can I say about her that you haven't said already? How rare is it to have a player that's a double-double threat every single night? She's a player that goes out there, on the boards, she's a problem. In the paint, scoring, she's a problem. Defensively, she's a problem. This is a player that not a single team in the country has found an answer for yet. No one has been able to stop Aaliyah Boston. I don't see any reason why Louisville or, should, we get to the national title game in UConn, or Stanford, whoever it is that they play, I don't see any reason why they're going to stop her because no one else has stopped her yet. Paige Becker's obviously, a dominant offensive player, but when it comes down to it, these games can be won and lost in the paint. And Aaliyah Boston is winning games for South Carolina every single night in the paint. So that's why I picked South Carolina win. Obviously, I think Louisville, like you said, Haley Van Lift has that Kobe mindset, that Kobe style play. She could drop 40 on them for all we know. But, it would take a supernova type of game to put up that offensive performance. And, you look how South Carolina plays defense as a team. North Carolina is the only team that has put up more than 50 of them in this tournament. They've been keeping teams to comically low scorelines, 33, 41, 27. This is a team that's stifling on defense. They're not going to give you anything, and you're going to need a star performance, a star game to beat this team.
I completely agree. I honestly do think that Stanford does project very well against South Carolina. They're the reigning champion, and they return all but one of their starting 5 from that team. I think you go between South Carolina and Stanford, the best 2 defenses in the country. Stanford averages 6.3 blocks and 35% field goal. I think that, in my opinion, I do see South Carolina eking out the win, though I could see Louisville doing it. I think they're going to play Stanford. I think it's just going to be a battle of 2 great defenses. I got to go with you. South Carolina's probably going to win, but I would love to see, the dynamic Paige Beckers break out a 30-piece, 40-piece, and win it all.
And that's enough of, national title talk for women's basketball. We have a national title team on our campus right now, Notre Dame fencing. Chloe has the report for Notre Dame television.
Hello, sports fans. Today, I'm here to talk about the best team on this campus. You might be thinking it's the football team, but no. I'm talking about the Notre Dame fencing team, who won their 12th national championship this weekend.
That's right. The Notre Dame Irish won their 12th Natty Champ, which was held here at Notre Dame. The team was 21 points ahead of both second-place Harvard and third-place Columbia. This win makes Notre Dame back-to-back champions.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into this weekend and see how some of our own Irish fencers did in this year's national championship.
In men's epee, Hunter Kandreva, in his first NCAA appearance, finished in 7th place, earning second-team All-American honors. He won 12 bouts out of 19. Nick Itkin finished in 6th place with a total of 15 bouts won, earning him second-team All-American honors. Luke Linder, the defending national champion, finished in 7th in men's saber. On the women's side, Kaylin Shea won the women's epee crown, becoming the 6th female epeists in program history to win a national championship in the weapons class. In the women's foil, Amita Berthier, who was the national runner-up, received first-team All-American honors and completed the women's saber competition as a national runner-up, earning first-team All-American honors.
Overall, this Irish fencing team had such an amazing weekend, but an even better season. Congratulations to the Notre Dame fencing team for winning their 12th national championship. Congratulations and go Irish.
All right, thank you, Chloe. Now we'll switch things up, look at the men's side a little bit, and we have what many pundits are claiming to be the greatest and biggest college basketball game of all time, UNC Duke. What are your thoughts, JJ?
I mean, it's hard to. I don't like the idea of calling this the greatest basketball game of all time. I don't like Duke or North Carolina. So, Jay Williams, with respect to you as a Jay myself, I have to disagree with your take. That being said, it's hard to deny the hype around this game, the narrative around this game is up there with any game we've ever had in at least modern college basketball history. Duke is a team in Coach K's last ride. It's their biggest rival in UNC. It's a Final Four. They've never even played in the NCAA tournament before. It's hard to deny the hype for this game. And, if you're looking at Duke, they're a team that has found their stride in the tournament. They are peaking when it matters most. All season it's been a little off the pace. Their final game at Cameron Indoor, UNC ruined that. In the game against Virginia Tech in the ACC tournament, Virginia Tech ruined that tour. So this is a team that all year has been playing for something that they haven't quite been able to reach, that title for Coach K, that last run out for Coach K. They haven't been able to do it. And this is a game where they're going to put it all on the line. You have to put it on the line. It's a rivalry game. It's the Final Four. You're 2 wins away from a championship. It's every player's biggest goal. Obviously, for Coach K, maybe means a little bit more because it's his last one. But, when it comes down to it, this is a game both teams have to put it all on the line. This is a game that means everything to the fans. It means everything to the schools. It's bragging rights. It's a national title bid to up for grabs. And it's hard to, understate, really, like you said, the significance of this game, both in, the terms of the general hype, the general narrative coming to this game, as well as, for the schools themselves. This is, you can't ask for a bigger game than this. It's a Final Four run. These schools are blue bloods. They're no stranger to these runs. But, when you play against your rival, no matter the year, no matter the game, it always means just that much more.
I completely agree. I think that this game has the most hype of any game of all time. You look about, the media that we live in today, the social media, ESPN running 24 hours on 5 different channels, seemingly. I think that, this is going to be it's going to be hyped up. However, we cannot call it the greatest game until it actually happens. Because right now, the greatest game of all time is Duke, Kentucky, Christian Laettner's turnaround final shots, right? So I think that we need to see how this actually plays out in terms of that, but I completely understand, like you were saying, why it is generating so much hype. This is Coach K's last hurrah, his final run. In my opinion, the greatest college basketball coach of all time, because he did it throughout all the decades. Back when players did stay all 4 years, 3 years, or he was able to build a roster from those guys. He's able to recruit in the one-and-done era, putting together, one of the greatest teams we've seen recently, Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, R.J. Barrett. The fact that he's so versatile speaks to his recruiting and also to his mind as a basketball genius. He's even been saying lately that this is very important to him to go out on top. He's been putting in extra hours that he normally doesn't, staying up very late to watch film, and I think that motivates the guys. They all love Coach K. There's a reason he gets these players. Not only is he smart and puts them in the NBA, but also because he's just a likable guy. Everyone wants to win one last one for Coach K, and that includes, their star, Paolo Banchero, likely going to be a top 3 pick in this NBA draft. He's absolutely dominated this tournament. He can take over games with his strength, and he's even been really nice from 3 recently, shooting 8 of 15 from beyond the arc in the tournament, and that just makes the defenders come up a little bit more than they have been, and with that, he can just beat him on the drive with that quick first step of his and just drive right on into the interior and finish strong at the rim. I think they have the most talented starting 5 rotation. They were able to go on these immense offensive scoring drives. They shot 17 of 24 against Texas Tech in the second half, doing so against, arguably the best team in the country defensively in the Red Raiders. Arkansas, another great defensive team. You look at Mark Williams, he can, do it all on the paint. Jeremy Roach can get hot from anywhere on the field. And A.J. Griffin, 6'6" wing, who is dynamite from 3, shooting 45.8% this year, which is good for second in the country for those shooting more than 150 attempts. However, I think what's going to, knock them is their defense. Of all the teams remaining, they are last in defensive efficiency, and you see that they can step up, like the final 5 minutes against Michigan State, where it's just a masterclass in defense, getting all the stops that they needed. However, I think that's the biggest knock against them. And I think that UNC is really going to have an offensive showing if they're going to be able to beat the Blue Devils this week.
Yeah, speaking of offensive masterclasses, look no further than UNC's last game against Duke. That was a game in which UNC, and this is why I think it's so hard for UNC to win this game. And people forget, that last game, Duke-UNC, the scoreline ended up, UNC ended up winning by 10. But that game, UNC did every single thing right. They hardly missed a shot in the second half. And it was still a back-and-forth game heading into the final 2 minutes. UNC pulled away from that game late, make no mistake. But until the final 2 minutes, UNC was playing the game of their lives. Everyone on the court was hitting every shot. They were playing the defense of their lives. And Duke was still going blow for blow with them. There's just so much talent on that Duke roster. You said it yourself, the length that team has. A.J. Griffin's a 6'6" wing who's going to kill you if you give him space from 3. Paolo Banchero is one of the best slashers in the country, obviously, and he has that pure height that you can't discredit him on the boards as well. Mark Williams is a problem down low. This is a team that has so much length, and they can also make you pay from beyond the arc. It's just so hard to match up with them, so hard to defend them. But to transition into, talking about UNC a bit, Armando Baycott's going to need to play well, because Baycott, in his own right, is such a good player. We shouldn't discredit his ability, though I talk about the talent of Duke, because when he turns it on, when he has the talent, against St. Peter's, obviously we talked about Cinderella. Sometimes the time is up, sometimes their time is over. But this St. Peter's team defensive ability should not be understated. In Casey and Defo, they have arguably one of the best defenders in all of mid-major basketball. One of the best shot blockers in the country, period. And Baycott was having his way against them. If he's able to bring that form into Duke, and a little more because it's Duke, I think UNC will be able to hang around this game. Brady Manic, another X factor, a player who has that length. He's 6'9", 6'10", but he can hit it from beyond the arc. You can't give him space. You can't give him the time to kind of set his feet. And if he does, if he gets that space, if he's able to make himself felt in this game, which he has been able to do all the back half of the stretch of the season for the UNC, the reason he's been the X factor in the back end of the season for UNC, if he's able to keep on doing that, keep on giving UNC 20 points a game, I think they're going to stay in this game because, like I said, you need to be playing the game of your lives, but a rivalry game is just the game to be doing that in.
I completely agree. The fact that it is North Carolina Duke, Coach K's final time, is going to make it close regardless. It doesn't matter how talented either team is. UNC Duke is always going to be an absolute battle. And, of course, when you can spoil Coach K once again, did it already, the final game of the season, in Cameron Stadium, and they can do it again here in the Final Four. I talked about, Armando Baycott, right? absolutely dominant. He's a traditional big man. He can run the floor. He's a great rebounder, but he's also a good scorer and facilitator. He usually likes to start at the perimeter, float into the lane a little bit, and at that point, he's such a great decision maker. At a snap of a finger, he can either drive in if he sees the defense is going to stay put on the perimeter, or he can kick it out if the defense collapses inward. I think that you talked about North Carolina being a potent offensive powerhouse, and that comes from their starting rotation being absolutely flamethrowers, right? They can score from deep. They call the Iron Five, their starting five. Caleb Love and R.J. Davis can score, they scored 30 this tournament. Brady Manic scored 26 twice, and Baycott has a double-double every game, both in the ACC and regular season tournament. I think that, ultimately, I think Duke is going to pull this one out in a close one, 69-66. But North Carolina's going to keep it close, and if they can hit their threes at around a 40% clip, I think they can pull off the upset. What do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with you on the general prediction. It's hard not to pick Duke in this game. You said it before, you said it earlier. This is a Duke team that, the knock on them all year has been they weren't playing, like you said, the final 5 minutes against Michigan State were a defensive masterclass, but you hadn't seen that, to this point all year from
Not
Duke.
Consistently.
Not consistently, at least. They'd bring it when they needed to. And, I think the tournament has finally been the time when they're bringing it for 40 minutes because you could see, in the regular season, when they had to bring it for 40 minutes against UNC in that game, in the ACC title game, when they had to bring it for 40 minutes, they kind of shied away. They weren't ready. But I think those losses, they've taken on the chin and they've gotten better. Now they know what it means to come out. I'd argue it's a knock on the team that, from the start of the season, they didn't know you had to come out and play 40 minutes at full intensity. But at least now, when they need it most, they're coming out. From the opening jump tip, they're ready to go. They're locked in. They don't need to get slapped across the face like, oh, we got to get going. They're ready to go from the opening tip. And I think then that, if they can bring that intensity for 40 minutes while limiting the mistakes that kept them against Virginia Tech from winning, I think it's hard not to pick Duke. But like you said, if North Carolina can get hot, if they can get Baycott going down low, if they can get Love, Cole, if they can get these guys going from deep, this is a team that, you shouldn't count out because they are, at the end of the day, still a blue blood playing against their biggest rival with all the talent in the world in that roster, and you can never count out a rivalry game.
I completely agree there. And I will say a little bit of a spoiler ahead of time, but I think whoever wins that game is my favorite to win the championship. Though we will look at the other side right now, Kansas-Villanova, starting with Villanova. Had a big win against Houston, who were my picks to go to the Final Four. And a lot of that comes from Cullen Gillespie, right? He's just been such a stud for that team. He's, a captain. He's a fifth-year senior. 15.6 points per game, 40.9% from deep. He can really score in a hurry. He's such a smart player too. I've been saying that a lot, but for me in college basketball, athleticism doesn't matter as much as opposed to your intelligence because you're not playing at the NBA level where everybody can, run and jump at just absurd levels. When it comes down to, being the smartest player on the field, I don't really think anybody can contend with Villanova's squad. Gillespie runs the point guard position unlike many other players in the country. I think he's going to be a pivotal reason why that they're going to be in position to win. And Coach Jay Wright, he loves efficiency, right? Villanova likes to run slow. They're the 13th slowest team in the country in terms of possessions per game and pace, and that's unlike any other team in the tournament. I think that's going to be critical, slowing down the game, running things at their tempo if they're going to beat Kansas. But I am worried a bit about their depth. They run a six-man rotation, and Justin Moore, their starting guard, who plays beside Colin, he's going to be out now. He ruptured his Achilles in the final minute against Houston, and as the second leading scorer and a great rebounding guard, I think that it's going to be very difficult for them to find a guy to come in so late and step up for him. Obviously, you have the sixth man, Caleb Daniels, who'll be inserted in the starting lineup, but in terms of bench depth, I don't really know who you look to right now if you're Villanova.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's difficult to describe the Villanova team without using the kind of traditional Villanova stereotypes because they are all of those. They're efficient. They're, fundamentally sound. They're great from the free throw line. They're, Colin Gillespie, is kind of that typical Villanova guard. He's, so cerebral in the way he moves the ball. Great decision maker. Obviously he has that, kind of an underrated, finishing ability as well. I don't know if we're going to have some highlights of that. But see, he's good to create. He's a player that can do a bit of it all at guard. He's a very fundamental player. He's also got that flash, that talent. I don't think enough people talk about it. Gillespie's a great, very smart player, good creator, but he also has the talent of any of the best point guards in the country. He can get to the rim, get a finish off. He can shoot very well, and I think this is a Villanova team that they're not going to beat themselves. They're never going to beat themselves. They're going to they do bounce passes. This is not a team that you can count on to make the mistakes that's going to lose the game to this team. What I do think is the problem with Villanova is, like you said, their depth. They played a tight rotation all year, and now they're without Justin Moore, meaning they're down to really just 5 players that have played major minutes all year. So against Kansas, they're going to, unless they want to run with the same starting 5 all game, which I doubt they're going to do. They're going to need someone to come off the bench and give you increased minutes, and I don't think we've really had an indicator, at least not in a major major game this year of who's that's going to be. If they can find someone on the bench, if it's someone, well, maybe they're going to bring one person that's going to give you an extra 10 minutes, or they're going to go extra 5 minutes for maybe 3 different guys. They're going to need to figure out some sort of retooling of the rotation that you're going to need to get Moore's minutes back on the court effectively and not run your guys ragged. Because Kansas, to pivot to the Jayhawks, do have that offense that they can push the tempo. They're going to want to push tempo. Even in the games that they don't play Villanova, they're going to want to get you up tempo. Against Miami, once they got the offense going, they were running down the court. They were throwing alley-oops. They were hitting popping threes. This is a team that loves to play offense. And against Villanova, like we're going to talk about the Jayhawks in a second, but why this works against Villanova is because they're going to need to stop that while only having 5 players. But moving to the Jayhawks, we've talked a bit about their tempo. Let's also talk about the roster a bit. What are your thoughts on how they profile as a contender?
Well, I just love the experience there. You look at, they run a 7-man rotation, right? So already gives you a bit more depth than the Wildcats. They got 4 seniors, a junior, and 2 sophomores. I love Ochai Agbaji. He is absolutely phenomenal. He's going to be, projected to be a lottery pick right now in this year's draft. He's a 3-level scorer. He can do it from deep, he can drive into the interior, and he can occasionally hit the mid-range. He struggles to create his own shot, but he's just simply so athletic that he's got a quick first step. He can go up and over his guys and finish right at the rim. I love him in transition. I really think that's going to be a key point for this Jayhawk squad. If they can make some plays on defense and get running out of transition, I don't think anybody on Villanova can get back in time to stop Agbaji from simply, jamming it home for an easy 2 points in that regard. I love his athleticism. I love his verticality. And I think that without any sort of strong interior defense that Villanova possesses, they're going to be able to do a lot in the paint. I love them for that. I also think that Remy Martin has really emerged in this tournament. He's finally healthy. I think that if he can step up, that's going to be pivotal for Kansas as well. I am concerned a bit about their streakiness. Despite having all that experience, we've looked in their games this season. You talked about Miami, right? They got out running in the second half and absolutely obliterated the Hurricanes. But they had that first half, too, that we can't ignore, in which their shots weren't falling, when they weren't playing the best defense. So it's going to be a little difficult, all right? This isn't the most talented Kansas team of all time. They have 0 5-stars. But they play together as a team. They are a cohesive unit, both on offense and defense, and are such a complete team all around. They play some of the best perimeter defense in the team, and I really think that's going to be a problem for the Villanova guards, especially Colin Gillespie. If he can, take off and do his thing, then yeah, the Wildcats have a bit of a chance. But the fact that they're lacking depth, and Kansas does play so tenaciously on the perimeter, I got the Jayhawks by, pretty comfortable lead, maybe 70-62. I don't expect the Villanova to really test Kansas in this one.
Yeah, and you brought up the streakiness as a negative trait of the Shamrock team, which it is. But I also think you can flip it and look at it as a positive aspect, because this team is its own spark plug. They never need kind of an energy to keep them going. They at any given moment could break this game wide open. Against Miami, like we keep on bringing up the example. First half, lethargic. The shots aren't falling. The offense doesn't look great. Second half, they hit 1-3, get in transition. Agbaji slams it home, and suddenly the game's wide open. Miami have no answers. I think whoever controls the tempo of the Villanova-Kansas game will win the game, because if Kansas can slow it down, if Villanova can slow it down, force Kansas, not just hit threes every shot, not just come and dunk, throw alley-oops, then, I think Villanova's a little more shot, because they can rest a little more on offense. You don't need to be running up and down the court with 5 guys. If Kansas can push the tempo, make Villanova run with them, make them go blow for blow with one of the best offenses in the country, I think it's hard to, say the Jayhawks won't win this game, because, like you said, they're an underrated defensive team as well. They play aggressive perimeter defense. They're not going to let Villanova, we talked about Villanova won't beat themselves. Kansas won't let Villanova beat them either. They're not going to make fundamental mistakes. And I think, Villanova, one of the things they do is they eat up teams who will make those fundamental mistakes. This is a Bill Self-coached team. They're always very consistent. They're good on defense. They're great on offense. I think this isn't a team that Villanova just lets it beat itself.
All right, yeah. So what would you say is the final score? If you had to pick, in your mind, who's winning this one?
I'd go 75-68 Kansas. I think Villanova keeps it close. I don't think they get blown out, because J-Wright teams don't get blown out.
No.
They're not going to let Kansas run all over them. But I do think, in the end, like I said, they just have that self-running spark plug. They can get going at any given time, and they have the offense to really floor teams at any given time. And like I said, I don't think Villanova's going to, let them run all over them. But I think at the end of the day, that offensive firepower is just a bit too much for Villanova to keep up with, especially on such a tight rotation. Because, if they have Justin Moore, this is a different game entirely. Moore provides you that presence down low. He can also handle the ball. But without him there, you're looking at a 5-man rotation, a bench that's largely untested in these games. I think it's hard to see them keeping up unless Jay Wright finds, a hero on his bench.
Yeah, right. It's going to take a miracle, in my opinion, for the Wildcats to pull this out. So we are both in agreement that we see Duke and Kansas matching up in the championship. Two blue bloods right there. We don't have a lot of time left, but what are your takeaways for this hypothetical matchup?
I don't know if it's my Coach K bias speaking, but I'll take Kansas. You know, I love a good storybook ending being ruined. I am a hater at my core. But all things aside, this is not a Coach K bias pick. This is a pick that I think Kansas has all year been a team that was very underrated. You know, they were beating teams by 20 consistently without it really kind of being noticed. You know, this is a team that, you know, kept on beating teams by wide margins and without anyone giving them the hype of, you know, the Baylors of the world. You know, the teams that they were not, I don't believe they've ever been number 1 at any point in the season.
Wow.
You know, they've kind of consistently lurked in that number 5 spot and, you know, that 10-5 range, which I think is very dangerous for a team because it means they still have something to prove in March. And I think both these teams here have something to prove. But I think Kansas, at the end of the day, they have enough defense. They're not going to let Duke, you know, just run all over them. They're not going to let the length of Duke kind of, you know, because I think teams sometimes get intimidated. You know, we saw it our first time with Notre Dame. You know, they had to go against Mark Williams, Paulo Gantero, AJ Griffin. They couldn't match up with that, and Duke just floored them. I don't think Kansas they have that big game mentality. You know, Bill Self has been here a million times before. He's obviously never won in recent memory, but they have that experience under the lights. You mentioned it's a roster that has a lot of experience in the NCAA tournament. I think that experience is going to be a big factor of this team. I don't think they're going to be scared by Duke. I don't think they're going to back down from Coach K's last game. I think they have that X factor, that National Player of the Year factor in Ochai Agbaji that's going to, you know, Ochai Agbaji that's going to lead them to the promised land.
Name.
Yeah, you know, it's a fun name, but I think he's that X factor. You know, you look at the national title teams in recent memory, you know, they always have a player that they can turn to in the clutch, they can turn to in the final moments. Agbaji is that player for Kansas, and Duke obviously has that player as well, but that's what makes them special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you right there. I'm going to think that Coach K is going to ride out into the sunset. He's going to win, and I got Duke. Go Blue Devils. This was Shamrock Sports. Thanks for tuning in.